On June 14th, 2025, millions of Americans took to the streets to protest their tyrannical government, creating the perfect opportunity for me to tell you about the Russian Revolution. So welcome to the story of Vladimir Lenin. Vladimir Lenin was born April 22nd, 1870, as Vladimir Ilyinich Ulyanov, in a city far east of Moscow. He was the third child born to his parents out of a total of 8, so 2 of his siblings tragically died in infancy. His childhood was fairly comfortable. His father had a successful career in education, and the family enjoyed a vacation cottage. Lenin's father, Ilya, was born into serfdom, essentially slavery. Ilya earned his freedom as a kid and went on to study physics and math at Kazan University. From there, he had his career in education and then rose up to be a state councilor in the 1880s. And that elevation in career is what shifted the family into the minor Russian nobility. Lenin's mother, Maria, was of mixed German, Russian, Swedish, and Jewish descent, though it is pretty unlikely that Lenin even knew of his mother's Jewish heritage. And the family unit appeared pretty solid, with Lenin showing a lot of promise academically from an early age, just like his father. And through his adolescence and early teens, he excelled at school and playing chess. But in 1886, when Lenin was 15, his father passed of a brain hemorrhage. This was catastrophic to the family, but Lenin took it particularly hard, and really seemed to harden his outlook on life. And his outlook would harden even more the very next year, when Lenin's older brother Alexander, who was away at college, got caught up in a conspiracy to murder the ruler of Russia. And it is largely believed that his brother's execution is what drove Lenin to pursue a career in radical politics. Because at this point, Lenin is an angsty teen with 2 middle fingers up to the establishment. And the establishment, or the Russian government, is fucked 6 ways from sideways at the moment. Russia had been making efforts for a while to modernize, structuring itself similar to the German and Austrian systems. But compared to places like the UK, France, and the United States, Russia was still very conservative, authoritarian, and ruled by czars who prioritized their own interests over the good of the nation. And like I said, Russia had been modernizing with Alexander II. Serfdom was ended, education was improving, policing systems were modernizing, more theological discussions were being had in the academic circles, especially among writers about the ideas of communism, anarchism, and nihilism, and other social political theories that directly impose the imperialist reality. The Russian people are now pushing back more than ever, and they're organizing opposition groups, like our old favorite, the People's Will. And these groups are organizing protest against the monarchy and calling for things like a parliament system. The People's Will was real as fuck with it too. Assassination, always on the table. They blew off the Tsar's legs with a bomb. Unfortunately, that ultimately did go against them, because the next in line was the Tsar's ultra-conservative fuck-ass son, Alexander III, who would usher in hard times in a big way for the poors. So the state of Russia that Lenin is growing up in is super chaotic, with this authoritarian crackdown on enlightenment on one side, and this electric questioning authority power to the people on the other. And then in 1887, Lenin goes off to Kazan University, and pretty much immediately joins protest groups against the government. Since the government is coming down hard on university students and student societies, because they fear that these students are going to outwit them with these new age ideas that don't benefit the monarchy. So now, Lenin is in his political activist bag, and he is getting expelled, he's getting arrested, and more importantly, increasingly radicalized against this bitch-ass ruling class. Lenin becomes a dedicated reader of Marx and Engels, who famously criticized the development of global industrialization in their Communist Manifesto pamphlet, basically promoting the idea that industrialization is happening and we need to fight so that all the profit goes to the means of production, the laborers who create the products through industrialization, not the owners of the company who pull all the profits from the work of the people. But of course, the rich ruling class doesn't want to fairly compensate the workers so that they can take the profits and elevate their own status. And our boy Lenin is watching industrialism sweep Russia, so this is resonating very heavily to him. In the 1890s, he graduates from college, sitting for his exams at St. Petersburg University, and he lands a job as a legal assistant. And he is still very active in political protest, especially as a famine sweeps Russia under Tsar Alexander III. A famine that left millions malnourished and killed 350,000. These extreme conditions and food insecurity in Russia is very much fueling political radicalization in the Russian people, which in turn is boosting communist and nihilist ideologies, which Lenin himself preached all through St. Petersburg, despite these ideas being heavily shut down by the Tsar and his government. A great news for my Alex haters though, because in 1894 the Tsar is taken out by his own liver failing him, and the crown of Russia was then passed to his hot freaky son, Nicholas II. And though we could argue that Nicky is more liberal than his father, the political state in Russia stayed virtually the same in the transition of power. And Lenin is fucking on him heavy. He is joining a communist cell of kids from the St. Petersburg Tech Institute who are going by the name Social Democrats. And Lenin is under government surveillance, obviously, but he really doesn't give a fuck, and the more they try to tighten the chain, the more radical Lenin becomes. And all of this political prowess might give heavy poli-sci virgin energy, but Lenin does pull some Marxist baddies, and enters into a relationship with Nadia Kupskaya, a school teacher who supported Marxism. A love story with a lot of jail time and a firing squad. And I'll tell you all about how this power couple dominated the revolution in the next one. So make sure you're following me and leave a comment so I can use it for the next video, and I'll meet you right back here for part 2, comrade.